So in my last video, I finished painting the key line. Now that it is dry, I'm ready to paint my extra parts, any of my decorations that didn't fall under the category of letter or key line or background. And that is things like arrows or other shapes or images you may have added to your graffiti. So I went ahead and, as I mentioned in my previous video, I'm looking to work with a yellow-green color for my arrows. And I'm going to work again with the wet on wet, and I'm going to use some yellow and some of this yellow-green in those arrow areas. When that's finished, then I'll take a final look at it, see if anything needs adjusted or added. So I've already mixed up my yellow-green color. As in previous videos, I had taken my watercolor set, activated the colors I'm going to use, and let that set for a couple of minutes, just so it gives time for the water to start softening that paint. And once I was ready, then on a separate item, in this case I like to use styrofoam plates, I transferred some colors over, mixed them, and I of course test swatched the color to see if I liked it. So this is the color of yellow-green I'm going to work with, and as I mentioned, I'm going to also be working with some yellow in those arrows also. I'm going to use the wet on wet technique, so that means I'm going to wet my arrows first and then apply the paint. So I'm going to go ahead and start that now, painting my decorations, in this case in my graffiti, the arrows that I have drawn around my letters. So I just finished painting my extra areas, my decorations around my graffiti, and now I'm going to let that dry. Once that is dry, then I'm going to determine if I need to add anything else to my graffiti or make any corrections to help things contrast and show up against each other. Now on camera, I'm not sure how well the color picks up. In person, there is a bit more brightness to this yellow and green area. On film, at least on my computer screen, it looks a little muted. So in person, it does seem to contrast more against that background I have of the key line. But again, since it is a wet on wet technique, the colors are being diluted a little more than what they were from the palette. So as it dries, I will have to wait to see exactly how vibrant or how much they contrast against that key line and the other letters to determine if there's anything else I need to do. So I'm going to let that dry and then I'll be back. So my arrows, my extra parts around my graffiti have dried, and looking at it both in person and on screen, I do think I want to just help the contrast a little bit more. And similar to like I did in the acrylic version I showed you, I'm going to add a little touch of darkness underneath my arrows just to help them really separate from that background. In my original, I used black in my acrylic version. So I'm going to use black again, just to add that little bit of shadow or drop shadow look. Okay, so that completes my graffiti project. Now, if you do decide to do something similar to me where you add some pure black paint to your design, make sure it is the last thing you add. So that's why I suggested that after my arrows dry and the last part I painted, which was the color of my decorations, to analyze it and determine what it is I want to do. And that is just because when we are working with black, if we wanted to go in, let's say I wanted to go in and change or brighten up more the key line to my design, you know, watercolor, when it gets wet again, will reactivate. And those were things I had to watch when I was painting in and around areas, is how close I got to letters and how wet I was leaving that area, because this paint would reactivate. So black is something I want to add last, just because since it's a very dominant and dark color, if it reactivates and starts to bleed into areas I already have painted, then it could leave me with more of a mess or hassle than what I want to deal with. So make sure that if you are using black, that it's one of the last things you add to your graffiti project. So that's the end of my graffiti project. I hope you are having as much fun as I was in the creation of it, and I can't wait to see yours.